Did you know there is an island named Isla de las Muñecas that is overrun by thousands of supposedly haunted dolls? It's said that if you visit this island without bringing the gift of a disheveled doll, you may return home and find an unwanted guest that has snuck into your life. The island is believed to be the home of hundreds of spirits. Do you really want to risk the ghost of a possessed doll following you home? The island stands 28 kilometers from Mexico City and is known as one of the most terrifying places in the world. It wasn't always like this. It used to house up to 100 people, but today, there isn't a living human in sight. The legend of this story is just as heartbreaking as it is horrifying. And it goes like this. Sometime between 1950 and 1960, when the island still had human inhabitants, a man named Don Julian Santana became a caretaker for the island before eventually he went on to purchase it. He was going about his day as usual. Santana was harvesting, collecting, and cleaning vegetables that he supplied to the nearest island. He was suddenly alert after hearing what he described as a child's scream, followed by a splash of water. Santana caught a glimpse of something small splashing around in the nearby chinampa. A chinampa is also known as a floating garden. It is an artificial island built to control flooding when excess water in the rainy season is diverted from Mexico City to nearby islands. As he approached, he discovered a young girl fighting for her life as she began to drown. Santana jumped in and tried to save the child, but he was unsuccessful. The child's lifeless body slipped under the water, never to be seen again. Although there is no proof of the young girl's death, it's believed this incident is what caused Santana to become uncomfortable and also tormented in his own home. His eyes were sunken from shock. He was shaking from fear and his mouth was wide from disbelief. Santana blamed himself. He was so overcome with grief, he rushed to his house before returning to the sunken chinampa to place a white crucifix on the ground. The young girl had lost her life. After many disturbed nights and horrifying screams heard coming from the forest, Santana feared he was being haunted. He blamed the death on himself and believed the young girl's soul would return to take her revenge. Over the next 17 years, Santana spent his life rummaging through trash and washed up waste. He hoped to find something that belonged to the girl, to keep a memory of her alive and show her respect. He wanted to prove to others that doubted him that she was real and possibly recover her body to lay her to rest properly. He was unsuccessful every time, until one day, he found a small decaying doll in the grass. He believed it belonged to the young girl and Santana tied the doll to a nearby tree out of respect. From this day forward, strangely, a large number of dolls began washing up on the island, but to Santana, it was never enough. Every day, he asked his friends, family, and neighbors for any old dolls or toys they had. He acted irrationally as he frantically searched trash cans, rivers, and homes. Eventually, he amassed over 800 dolls. It's still a mystery as to how Santana managed to collect hundreds of dolls without leaving this tiny island. He seemed to be driven by an overwhelming amount of guilt. Some people believe he was possibly possessed by an unseen force. His collection of old and broken dolls only grew bigger. No matter what he did, the voices of the young girl's spirit still echoed around the island each night. The sounds of a screaming child and splashing water haunted his mind so much that he hoped tying multiple mutilated and decapitated dolls to the trees would scare away any spirits that tried to haunt his dreams and his waking life. Santana continued to tie dolls around the island until it became uninhabitable for a human to live on. It's believed the more dolls he added, the more spirits he accidentally welcomed to the island. Santana was unable to stop. Santana stayed on the island until he passed away in 2001. His cause of death was ruled a heart attack, but the story of where his body was found only instills more fear into those who visit. Don Julian Santana was found, you guessed it, in the canal. His face was down with his head near the white crucifix he had placed there 17 years earlier. The island was then passed down to his nephew, who opened the island to tourists. People began flocking to the island to show respect to Santana and the young girl. This is when the real horror started. People from all over the world began experiencing strange things on their visit to the Island of Dolls. From hearing strange noises to being pushed when standing too close to the water, it's believed by many that there was more than one spirit trapped on the island. The more stories that were told from the island, the more people wanted to see it for themselves. The story of Santana and his doll island spread around the world and everyone was intrigued. Visitors began piling in on boats and they were horrified as they were surrounded by thousands of mutilated, decapitated, and decaying dolls. Visitors were allowed to bring their own dolls to tie up around the island. Some of them were brave enough to touch the existing dolls, and not all of them are here to tell the tale. People describe the island as something far worse than a horror movie. The energy is described as feeling heavy, and there's a strong sense that you are never truly alone. In 2020, a woman by the name of Jessica Chabot and her investigative crew visited the island to film a documentary. Whilst on the island, tour guides took Jessica to see the original doll believed to have belonged to the little girl. Almost immediately, Jessica began to feel very uneasy. Her skin turned pale as she felt the sudden urge to cry. Jessica was left alone in the room with a battery-powered walkie-talkie and a camera that faced her. She began asking if any spirits around her could talk to her using the lights. Sure enough, the lights began flickering and a faint whisper came from the corner. In a gentle voice, the word, "Mama," echoed around the wooden shed where Jessica was sitting. She was so overwhelmed by this voice, she and the camera crew packed up pretty quickly and left the island. Throughout the recording, you can hear multiple muffled voices. Some say it was just the static of the speaker. Others believe it was the voice of a little boy looking for his mother. The island is so popular, nearby islands have attempted to replicate the Island of Dolls in hopes of attracting tourists. A visitor from Miami said, "You will know if you are on the real Island of Dolls. You can just feel it." Many people say the island gives them an eerie feeling that they are being watched. Some even claim to have heard and seen a girl wandering around the edge of the island as she screams inaudibly. Locals say they can see the dolls move around and even fall from the trees as they watch from afar. Tour guides have claimed the dolls have blinked and turned their heads to face bypassers. Some visitors claim that after returning home from their trip to the island, they felt very uneasy and nauseous. People began to fear that they had accidentally brought a spirit home with them. They believed taking an old doll back to the island would let the spirit return to the island. Over the years, the island has managed to collect over 2,000 dolls with the help of Santana, tourists, and the canal that frequently and mysteriously washes to shore old, decaying dolls. To visit the Island of Dolls just off the Xochimilco Channel, Mexico City, it will cost you $2, but if you are feeling brave, an extra 20 pesos will give you the chance to explore the haunted island alone. Whatever you do, do not touch any dolls that are already tied up. You will risk bringing home the soul of those who once lived inside the dolls. Are you brave enough to visit the Island of Dolls?